All right, folks, buckle up. We're diving deep into the Epstein files release, and let me tell you, what we're seeing is less a transparent unveiling and more a masterclass in government obfuscation. If you thought they were going to lay it all out for us clear as day, you clearly haven't been paying attention to how Washington, or in this case, the DOJ, operates. This whole thing smells fishier than a tuna sandwich left out in the California sun.
I have two great guests joining me here to kick off the show. Andrew Weissman is the former general counsel at the FBI. Julie K. Brown is an investigative reporter for the Miami Herald, responsible for breaking the Epstein story wide open all the way back in 2018. There are no two people I'd rather be talking to at the start of the show tonight. I'm so grateful to both of you. Andrew, let me just start with you. I know you've been pouring through these documents, the ones that have been released. They've only been searchable for a couple of hours now. Let me start by just asking you to give us your big picture take on kind of what happened today, and what we know, if there's much new we do know.
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head with the first thing that we know is that the law was violated. I mean, it's just black and white. The law said this is the deadline, as Chris Hayes spoke to you about, and they didn't comply with it. And one of their excuses is, well, you know, this is a complicated process and it takes a lot of time, and so we'll be complying with at least part of this going forward. At the same time, Todd Blanche, while he's saying that, he also said, you know, Donald Trump for years, he said, has wanted us to be completely transparent. Well, if that's true, then they've had years to do this, not just a few days. And so there's just this inherent discrepancy to sort of their, death by 1,000 cuts approach to the release of these documents. And then the other big picture point I had is, remember in September, the Department of Justice issued a memo saying there's nothing to see here in the 300 gigabytes of material that is in the Epstein files. Well, if there's 300 gigabytes of material, I think I would take issue with we've now been disclosed 10%. I don't think the hundreds of thousands, I never do math in public, but I would say that, 300 gigabytes and, hundreds of thousands of documents don't compute. We really do, by the Department of Justice's own admission, just taking their own statements, have a tiny sliver of what they have.
You don't have to be a mathematician, Andrew. You have a bazillion other strengths, so that's the good news. Julie, your incredible reporting and in your willingness and ability to tell the stories of these survivors is a huge reason why we're here in the first place. You know this case better than almost anyone out there. What stood out to you about what was in there, what wasn't in there, and really how everything kind of went down today?
Well, I think the Justice Department is apparently counting on the fact that the victims, don't know what's in the files, when in fact many of them do know exactly what they told the FBI and exactly what are in the files. Also, there's a lot of attorneys that have been affiliated with this case that know what the FBI knows. And virtually none of that information was released today. You mentioned a couple of documents early on in the broadcast, this letter about the roses, and those materials were from the 2005 search warrant that was issued on Epstein's Palm Beach mansion. And so those materials were recovered way back then. They are part of the public record. So again, these are documents that they're throwing out there that sound interesting. They're not putting them in context when in fact they could clearly note that these are part of that early investigation, and they don't. They just throw out these documents all jumbled up so that in the hope that people won't figure out that, they're really kind of pulling a switch here with saying we're being transparent, when in fact they're only digging up old material and kind of tossing it in a bowl and throwing it online.
I mean, this is such a good point. I think they're making the assumption that most people, the overwhelming majority of people, don't know as much as you know and have not followed as closely, and it's going to feel new, or some things, or is this new or isn't it new, and does that meet some kind of bar, and we're about to go in the holidays. That's incredibly cynical, just to say the least. Let me ask you, Andrew, I mean, the date started with, of course, Trump's Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, essentially telling Fox News, even before we saw the release, he essentially told told them they weren't going to comply with the law earlier this morning. He said that they will release more documents in the coming weeks, which, of course, not what the law says, to your point that you've already made. But members of Congress have said, many of them, including Massey, Democrats and Republicans, have said they're kind of exploring every legal avenue to get them to comply. You are a lawyer extraordinaire. I mean, what would you advise them to do to compel them to comply?
Well, there are a number of things they could do. They've obviously talked about having hearings, calling the Attorney General in for a hearing. You know, that's one thing. But there also is stuff they can do that has teeth. They can have impeachment proceedings with respect to statements made by certain people, like Todd Blanche's statements, which, you know, I find strikingly, let's just say, discordant with the facts, or to quote a judge in another context, untethered to the facts. And the other is, if you violate a congressional statute that says do something by X date, and you don't do it, and it's intentional, and you have Todd Blanche saying that on air, that is potential criminal liability, and that does not go away. That doesn't even go away if they were to actually later comply. There has been a violation of the law now, and that's something, remember, the statute of limitations, the amount of time that you have to bring that kind of case is 5 years. Not to do math again, but 5 years would take us to after the Trump presidency is over.
Congressman Massey essentially warned of this. I mean, he said a future DOJ could convict the current attorney general and others because the Epstein Files Transparency Act is not like a congressional subpoena, which expires at the end of each Congress. To his credit, he very much spelled it out there. Julie, let me ask you, I mean, as you noted, there's really not much new in the documents today. Obviously, there's a lot more that they have to release, they're supposed to release according to the law. The search function was not available until about 7 p.m.-ish time tonight. We were all looking through there. And it made me kind of wonder, for people like you who know this case so well, as there are future releases, how do you look, what are you looking for? Like, how are you using the search mechanisms? What kind of new information do you think there could be, or do you hope to see in future releases?
Well, first of all, the whole process is incredibly tedious.
Exactly.
For me, even. And it's just, these are individual PDFs that you have to almost call up each one individually. Sure, you can search, but the search mechanism doesn't always work properly. And when you're doing photos, you can't really use a search mechanism for these photos. A majority of the files today seem to be photographs. So you can't search those because they're not labeled. You have to go through them one by one. So it's just not designed to be user-friendly, and maybe that is on purpose.
I mean, I think you nailed it on the head there. If you have covered this story more closely than probably almost any other journalist out there, find it tedious, which it is tedious. We had a whole team of people trying to go through stuff today. The survivors, they're just normal human beings. So we're just trying to get access to their information, and it makes it almost impossible to do, which does feel, unfortunately,